What's up guys, my name is Ace, and it's now been 1 week since the release of Modern Warfare 2, and now that I've had a good amount of time to really sink my teeth into this game and finally make it to max rank, I thought it was a great time to share my week 1 review for this game. Of course, with that being said, just keep in mind this is my review based on my experiences as well as my preferences when it comes to Call of Duty. You may disagree, and that's totally fine. But let's just hop right into this, and I'm gonna start it off with the good things, the things that I'm liking so far about this game. And the first thing is quite a big deal. This is the map design. When it comes to the 6v6 maps, I'm generally pretty impressed with the rotation of maps we have at launch. In my eyes, this is a significantly better collection of maps than we saw with the launch of Modern Warfare 2019, and that goes a long way when it comes to my enjoyment of the game in general. Now, out of the 10 maps that launch with the game, there's honestly only one map that I would say that I actively dislike, and that's the border crossing map. For all of the other ones, I either really like them, or I at least think they're okay. They're not that bad, I don't mind playing on them. And at least for me, having 9 out of 10 at least half decent maps is excellent. Overall, I'm really liking the variety in settings, layouts, color palettes. I love the fact that we finally have some color in an Infinity Ward Call of Duty game. There's also one thing I really like about their Modern Warfare 2019 design philosophy that they brought over to this, and that is the fact that you can jump on just about anything. And this can really open things up and allow you to use your imagination a lot to outplay the enemy, and I really like that part of Infinity Ward's map design. As for the next thing, this is the general gunplay. I think the gunplay feels excellent. The guns sound and feel really good. Some of the movement can feel a bit clunky at times, but something many people aren't aware of is the sprint out times are actually very good in this game. They're faster than Modern Warfare 2019, and that's excellent to see, but there is also one other downside I wanted to point out with the gunplay at this point. I do feel like there's a bit too much visual recoil in the game. I'm not talking actual recoil, but just visual recoil. And I also feel like the default amount of sway while aiming down sight is too high on most of the guns. Outside of those fairly nitpicky complaints, I would say the gunplay is quite solid. And speaking of that, the gun balance is not bad for the launch of a Call of Duty game. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that the gun balance is absolutely flawless and there's no room for improvement, because there is. But in the game's current state, I honestly feel like I can use quite a few different guns and still be at least moderately competitive in the game. And that's at least a good starting point for them to work off of when it comes to weapon balancing. Additionally, coming from the beta build of this game to launch, the footsteps are significantly better, at least for me as somebody that likes being a bit more on the aggressive side. I love the fact that people aren't hearing me loud and clear through multiple walls from like 40 meters away or anything crazy like that. And I have found this generally allows me to move around the map a lot more effectively than I could in the beta. Now, these footsteps still can be a bit loud through some surfaces, but the general footstep balance, I would say, is a huge improvement over the beta, and I don't feel nearly as punished for moving around the map. After that, let's talk about the swimming mechanics. I think this is a good feature that they brought into this game, and I like the way you handled it, where you can only use pistols while underwater, but you can use full auto guns if you're at the surface of the water. And I especially like the fact that they didn't treat this as a gimmick and go completely overboard with it. And instead, it's just limited to one 6v6 map currently, but I feel like it adds a really interesting dynamic to that map, and I think it fits really well playing that map. Additionally, I'm really finding the progression and camo unlock systems to be very refreshing. Now, this opinion may change over time, but so far, I'm really liking the fact that if I want to unlock a gold gun, it's not going to take me several days of playing the game just for that one gold. Instead, I can typically knock out a gold gun easily within a gaming session if I really put my mind to it. And I also love the fact that when you unlock a camo, it unlocks for every gun in the game. I think that's excellent. As for the other parts of progression, this is something that may be a little bit controversial, but I actually really like the fact that the game kind of forces you to branch out and try a wide variety of guns in order to unlock either different guns within a platform's tree, or in order to unlock certain attachments in the game. I totally realize not everybody likes that, and I get it, but for me, I at least find it to be refreshing. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for the main things that stood out in my mind as being good about Modern Warfare 2. And honestly, I do think there's a lot to like about this game. But now, let's move into the bad section. And this one is going to require a whole lot more explanation, so I anticipate it's going to be a much longer section. But just because it's longer doesn't mean I hate the game. The first thing I want to bring up that I really don't like about this game is the perk system. In my opinion, this takes so much away from the gameplay experience while adding nothing interesting to the gameplay experience, at least in my opinion. I feel like it just artificially holds back playstyles for a section of the match, and that's completely unnecessary. Why not just let everybody use whatever perks they want, and then just make sure you balance those perks with proper trade-offs? I think the biggest issue here is obviously the Ghost perk, because this makes UAVs incredibly powerful since people can't have the Ghost perk for the first at least several minutes of a match. And that's incredibly frustrating if you're trying to flank, for instance, and you might be like just approaching the enemy spawn or just getting behind the enemies, and you've been really stealthy and sneaky and doing everything right, but then they call a UAV in and now they immediately know your location, and there was literally nothing you could have done about that. Even if you try to shoot them down, by the time you do that, they get several UAV pings, and this typically leads to snowballing in matches. And like I said, I just don't see any upside to having this perk system. I really hope this is one of those areas that they end up reevaluating over time and potentially even making some serious changes to. I don't anticipate anything like that would come anytime soon, but maybe within the next several months, we could see some noticeable changes to the perk system. I also have one note with the perk system here that I don't like, and this is the perk packages. Honestly, I find it much easier to just swap out individual perks for individual classes. I don't like the fact that if I change a perk for one class in one perk package, any other class that also has that perk package is now immediately changed as well. And for me, this is a fairly minor annoyance, but it's an annoyance nonetheless. As for the next thing that I'm really not liking about this game so far, this is their spawn system. And I'm not talking about just a few bad individual spawns here or there. I'm talking about the entire spawn system that they use. I absolutely hate this style of spawn system where there is no set, this is my side of the map, and therefore the enemies are spawning on the other side of the map. And instead, it feels like people can just be spawning anywhere at any given time, and this often leads to horrible map flow. It essentially invalidates the flanking playstyle, because the moment you start getting on the enemy's flank and you think you're being super sneaky, all your teammates start spawning all around you, and now you're not stealthy, now you're not doing anything special. And another thing I've noticed is depending on how the enemies are playing, some matches I literally feel like I'm playing hide and seek, because I don't know where they're spawning at any given time, and therefore I feel like I'm just aimlessly wandering around the map, hoping I run into somebody and notice them before they notice me. There really doesn't seem to be a whole lot of rhyme or reason behind this spawn logic that they're using. And while I know that COD spawns tend to be pretty bad at launch, and they do tune and tweak them over time, I feel like this game is going to need a whole lot more than just a little bit of tuning and tweaking when it comes to spawns. I'd really like to see a complete overhaul when it comes to the spawn system. As for the next thing on my list of bad, this is all of the missing features. Now, I did a whole dedicated video last week on this, so I'm not going to talk about every feature in this video, but let's just list out some of the core features that are missing from this game. First up, hardcore game modes. They aren't coming till Season 1. There's no barracks with a combat record or challenge lists, calling cards and emblem lists so you can see what the challenges are to complete them. There's no proper after-action report. There's only an after-action scoreboard. There's no double XP countdown. There's no camo pop-ups when you unlock a camo in-game. There's no reticle challenges. They've removed weapon tuning. There's no detailed weapon stats in the gunsmith. Some attachments can't be unlocked at all, and there's no apparent path to even unlock them at this point. The firing range itself is super bare bones and doesn't feel like it's in a completed state by any means. Essentially what I'm getting at here is this game doesn't really feel complete when it comes to features. It almost seems like they just ran out of time and they hit their launch date and had to launch it even though all these features weren't quite ready yet. And while I'm sure we're going to see them at some point down the road, most of these are features that 100% should be there at the launch of a Call of Duty game. After that, their user interface is still awful to navigate. I really don't like the UI. I believe they have confirmed that they will be making adjustments to this over time, but it is going to take some time. In either case, that still deserves a spot on the bad part of this list. Then we have the Dead Silence field upgrade. I hate the fact that there's still an activation noise for this. It's a really loud beeping noise that enemies can hear, so you're announcing the fact that you're going into stealth mode and are going to start sneaking up on them, which is ridiculous. On top of that, the general animations in this game, in my opinion, are way too slow. I'd love to see these sped up across the board because it takes so long just to call a UAV in, or if you unlock a UAV and a counter UAV, calling both of those in simultaneously, that seems to take ages, and I feel like it just pulls you out of the fight unnecessarily. Like, why are you holding people back for just calling in a streak like that? It doesn't make too much sense to me. Next up, the attachment balance in the game doesn't seem to be very good. I made a video on this. Many times in this game, I've found that you're better off with no attachments on your gun, or at least limited attachments on your gun. And personally, I just don't feel like that should be the case. I think there should be trade-offs with attachments, but I also feel like the upsides should almost always outweigh the downsides of an attachment. And in the game's current state, it doesn't seem like that's the case for at least a ton of the attachments in the game. Another thing is lobbies still seem to be disbanding constantly. I don't think I've seen a single lobby stay together the entire time I've been playing this game over the past week. And yet they did mention that they made some adjustments so that lobbies wouldn't disband as often as they used to. That just doesn't seem to be working, at least for me, at all. Although I am curious to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Have you noticed any lobbies staying together while playing the game, or are they always disbanding for you as well? Another thing I've been struggling with a little bit, but honestly, I kind of expect this within the launch window of a Call of Duty game. This is really inconsistent connection and hit detection experiences. On a game-to-game basis, it seems like this swings so wildly. One game, I'll feel like the hit detection's on point. I kind of feel like a god. I'm just melting people. And then literally the next game, I'm shooting marshmallows. Like, people aren't going down, and it feels like they're able to kill me way faster than I can kill them. And that's obviously really frustrating, but again, that's kind of expected at launch at this point. That's something that almost always improves throughout a Call of Duty game's life cycle, so I anticipate this will improve, but I'm still gonna bring it up here. And then finally, there's one last thing I want to talk about in the bad section here, and you can probably guess what it is. This is the matchmaking system. It seems like they're using essentially the exact same skill-based matchmaking or engagement-optimized matchmaking algorithm that they've been using for the past 3 years. And while I have managed to find some excellent workarounds that aren't full-on exploits, it still is really frustrating to see this system in place, especially since it doesn't seem to be prioritizing your connection. Now, I'm sure some of you guys are curious how I'm able to mitigate skill-based matchmaking without reverse boosting or exploiting in any way. And I've got a few different methods. First up, disabling crossplay seems to help pretty considerably when it comes to this. However, only PlayStation users have the option to do this in-game, although I believe Xbox users are able to do it if you go through the console settings, not the in-game settings. But in either case, I have noticed this tends to lead to much more mixed lobbies in the game, which is nice to see. Another thing I do is I just filter my connection with my NetDuma router. I don't let their matchmaking system pull me away from the data centers where I get the best connection possible. I'm essentially forcing ping to be king again, which is kind of annoying that you do need a special piece of hardware just to get the best connection possible and to make sure their matchmaking system doesn't pull you out of region for a better skill match in regular public matches where you don't even get to see what your skill rank is. But I have found when I filter my connection with the NetDuma router, again, I tend to get much more mixed lobbies, and I don't feel like I'm playing in a tournament game after game. And then finally, one other thing I've been able to do to mitigate the effects the skill-based matchmaking system has is simply play in a party. I do find if you party up with at least 4 other people in the game, this tends to have a really big impact on skill-based matchmaking and lead to a lot more mixed lobbies in game. So that's yet another area where I've been able to at least mitigate the effects of skill-based matchmaking without exploiting anything. And to be crystal clear here, none of these things that I do give bot lobbies or anything. It's not the same as reverse boosting or joining on a low skill account. I still do get really hard matches mixed in, but I just find that I get a much more mixed bag of lobby experiences. Sometimes it's really difficult, sometimes it's easy, and most of the time it's somewhere in the middle. And with that, that's going to lead me into my sort of final conclusion at this point. Honestly, when it comes to this game, I'm having fun despite all of the issues that are currently present. There is a lot that still needs to be worked out with this game, and like I said earlier, it does kind of feel like it wasn't quite finished. It wasn't quite ready to be launched. But over time, as we get more features added to the game and we get a much more complete product, I do think this is going to be a good Call of Duty game overall. And a huge part of that is honestly just the map design for me. I do see myself enjoying this game a whole lot more than I enjoyed Modern Warfare 2019, at least when it comes to the 6v6 experience. Although, keep in mind, I do use those techniques to help mitigate the skill-based matchmaking system, and honestly, I would have a totally different opinion and impression of this game if I just played solo with crossplay turned on and without filtering with my NetDuma router. In those cases, I honestly don't like this game, and I don't think I'd be playing it at all outside of what I need to do for work. Because in the higher levels of play, all of the little issues with the gameplay design are exacerbated, and also if you let the skill-based matchmaking do its work, you're not necessarily going to get the best connection possible. Of course, these are all just my thoughts. This is where I want to hear from you guys in those comments down below. For anybody that has been playing Modern Warfare 2 so far, what is your impression of this game now that we've had some time to play around with it? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.